The Land of Toys. Pinocchio reached up and knocked on the door, rat-a-tat-tat. He waited and waited, and finally a snail appeared at the top window.
"Who's that at this hour?" she called.
"Pinocchio, I'm the puppet who lives here with the fairy. Please hurry and open the door."
"I'm coming,"
said the snail.
"But, my boy, I'm a snail, and snails never hurry."
9 hours later, the front door finally opened, and the helpful snail, who had done her very best, greeted Pinocchio, who was by now so weak with hunger that he fainted. When he came to, he was lying on a sofa with the fairy bending over him.
"Where have you been?" she said. "Why were you not at school?"
Feeling ashamed, Pinocchio confessed that he had run off with the other boys instead of staying and learning his lessons. The fairy looked sad, but she said she would forgive him one last time.
"I will be good," promised Pinocchio. "This time I really will."
"Then tomorrow your dearest wish will be granted," said the fairy. "You will stop being a puppet and become a real boy. To celebrate, we will invite all your school friends to tea." The fairy set to work. She prepared 200 cups of milky coffee and 400 buttered buns. Soon everything was ready for the grand occasion. Pinocchio asked the fairy if he could go and give out the invitations. He promised to be back before it was dark. The fairy kissed him goodbye.
"Take care, Pinocchio," she said. "Promises are easy to make, but they are easily broken too."
Pinocchio first went to find his friend, Lampwick. He was one of the naughtiest boys in the school, but Pinocchio was fond of him.
"I've come to invite you to my tea party," said Pinocchio. "For tomorrow I will become a real boy."
"I'm afraid I can't come," said Lampwick. "I'm leaving tonight for the Land of Toys."
"The Land of Toys? What happens there?"
"Oh, it's a wonderful place," said Lampwick. "You just have fun from morning to night. There's no school, no books, no teachers. Why don't you come with me?"
"I promised the fairy I would be home before dark," said Pinocchio, beginning to hesitate.
"Are you going by yourself?"
"No, there'll be 100 of us. I'm waiting for the coach."
The dusk was deepening, and in the distance they saw a tiny light moving along the road and heard the sound of bells jingling.
"There it is,"
said Lampwick, jumping to his feet.
"Is it true that in the country boys never have to go to school?"
"Never," said Lampwick. "Then I will come with you," said Pinocchio,
his promises all forgotten. The coach, already full of boys, was a splendid sight. It was drawn by 12 pairs of little donkeys, all the same size, and all wearing smart white boots. The coachman, who had a face like a rosy apple and a voice as smooth as butter, called down, "All aboard for the Land of Toys!" Lampwick climbed up, but Pinocchio suddenly thought of his fairy.
"I'm going back home," he said.
"Don't leave! Come with us and have a good time!"
shouted all the boys together.
Pinocchio sighed, and then he said, "Move up. Make room for me."
"There's no room left," said the coachman. "If you want to come, you'll have to ride on one of my donkeys."
Pinocchio pulled himself onto the donkey's back, and the coach began to move off. As they galloped along the road, Pinocchio thought he heard a tiny voice coming from the donkey.
"You poor fool. You'll be sorry.
And a little further on he heard the same voice say,
Remember, stupid boy, that children who run away come to a bad end. One day you'll cry as I am crying now, but by then it will be too late.
Pinocchio shivered, but he took no notice. He couldn't wait to get to the land of toys. The coach arrived at daybreak, and it was indeed a wonderful place. Children were playing everywhere. Some were playing ball, some were playing conkers, others were on bicycles, some were on hobby horses. One group was playing catch and another blind man's buff. Pinocchio and Lampwick soon joined in and made friends with everyone. The days and weeks flashed past. After 5 wonderful months of playing about all day long, Pinocchio woke one morning to a horrible surprise. He put up his hand to scratch his head and found that he had grown, guess what? Donkey's ears.
Oh no! Shrieked Pinocchio. What is happening to me?
He began to cry.
Oh, why did I not listen to my fairy?
He wailed.
What am I to do?
At that moment, Lampwick arrived. Oh dear. Pinocchio saw that Lampwick, too, had long, hairy ears, and that wasn't all. They found that they could no longer stand up straight, but had to run around on all fours. And do you know what was the worst of all? When they opened their mouths to speak, all they could say was, "Ee-aw, ee-aw." There was a loud bang on the door. It was the coachman. Before Pinocchio had time to lift the latch, the coachman opened it himself by giving it a violent kick.
Well done, boys, he said. You brayed very well. I recognized you immediately, and here I am.
And he took out a curry-comb and groomed the 2 donkeys till their coats shone like glass. Then he put halters on them and led them to market. For you see, the coachman had a fine trade. Every now and then he would persuade all the naughty boys who hated school to jump in his coach. When it was full, he would drive to the land of toys. Here the stupid boys would do nothing but amuse themselves until they turned into donkeys. Then the coachman would drive them to market and sell them. And so Lampwick was sold immediately to a peasant whose donkey had died the day before. Pinocchio was sold to a ringmaster in a circus, who needed a donkey as part of his circus act. Every day the ringmaster taught Pinocchio tricks. He had to learn how to jump through hoops, dance, and stand on his hind legs. If he made mistakes, the ringmaster would whip him. It was a very hard life. At last the day came when Pinocchio was ready to appear in a special gala performance with the other circus animals. All the seats were taken, full of boys and girls longing to see a donkey dance. Soon the ringmaster appeared and made an announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome a famous donkey who has already entertained all the kings and queens of Europe. The audience cheered, and Pinocchio trotted into the ring. Now the ringmaster gave a deep bow, and turning to Pinocchio, he said, Before beginning your act, Pinocchio, bow to the ladies, gentlemen, and children. Pinocchio did as he was told. Now, forward march! Pinocchio had to walk, then trot, and then gallop round the ring. As he galloped, the ringmaster fired a pistol into the air, and Pinocchio lay on the ground. It was then that he caught sight of a beautiful lady in the audience. was wearing a gold chain round her neck from which hung a medallion. The picture on the medallion was of a puppet. "That is my picture," thought Pinocchio. "That is my fairy." And he got up and went over to where she was sitting and cried, "Oh, fairy, dear fairy." But instead of these words, the sound that came out was a particularly loud "ee-aw." The ringmaster rushed over with his whip and beat the donkey on the nose, and when Pinocchio next looked at the audience, the fairy had disappeared. Pinocchio was now supposed to jump through a paper hoop, but he was crying so much that his back leg got caught and he fell to the ground. When the ringmaster pulled him up, he could hardly walk. Poor Pinocchio was quite lame.
"That donkey's no use to me," said the ringmaster. "Take him back to the market and sell him."
It didn't take long to find a buyer. A man who wanted to make a drum from the donkey's skin paid 20 pence for him. As soon as the deal was done, the man dragged poor Pinocchio down to the seashore. There he tied a stone around the donkey's neck and a long rope around one of his legs. Holding onto the rope, he knocked him into the water. Weighted down by the stone, Pinocchio quickly sank to the bottom of the sea. The man sat on the rock to wait. After 50 minutes, he muttered to himself, "My donkey will be well and truly drowned by now." He began to pull on the rope. At last, guess what came to the surface? A live puppet, wriggling like an eel. The man thought he must be dreaming. "Where's the little donkey I threw into the water?" he cried. "The sea plays funny tricks sometimes," said Pinocchio. "Do you want to know how it happened? Untie my leg and I will tell you." The man undid the rope, and free at last, Pinocchio sat down and told the man his story. He also told him all about the good fairy. "You see, she is my mother, and like all good mothers, she looks after me. When she saw that I might drown, she sent a shoal of fishes along. They thought I really was a dead donkey, and they began to eat me. By the time they had finished, all that was left was my hard wooden body, and of course they couldn't eat that." "That's all very well," said the man, annoyed, "but I gave 20 pence for you, and I want my money back. I'll sell you for firewood." "Sell me if you like," said Pinocchio. "I don't care." And he jumped back into the water. "Goodbye, master," he called. "If you ever need a little bit of dry wood, remember me." Pinocchio swam quickly out to sea. After a while he caught sight of a reef in the middle of the ocean. It was as white as marble, and Pinocchio could see a goat standing on top of it. The goat's coat was a very odd colour. Instead of being white or brown, it was a deep, dark blue, and it reminded Pinocchio of the fairy's hair. Pinocchio's heart began to thump, and he swam as fast as he could towards the reef, but oh dear! When he was almost there, the horrible head of a sea monster reared up. It had an enormous mouth and 3 rows of teeth. Can you guess what it was? Yes, you are right. It was the terrible shark.
and he started to chase Pinocchio, his great jaws wide open, his sharp teeth poised. Faster and faster swam Pinocchio. He had nearly managed to reach the reef when the shark caught up with him. Opening his jaws wide, he swallowed Pinocchio down in one gulp.